Hey everyone, this is Jeneen with Candidly Single Mom, and we are here talking all things single parenthood journey. So today I want to do what I'm going to call a little bit of a mental flossing and kind of deviate from sharing my story. If you have been listening and keeping up with me, the last episode, I talked about the moment that I knew that the relationship was not going to work. I kind of got a little bit of my strength and awareness to know that this marriage was super dysfunctional. And I asked my husband, now ex-husband, to leave. But instead of going into what happened next, I wanted to take a moment to kind of just talk about what I think is an underlying characteristic of me as far as some of the things that I do that might not be a little bit healthy in a way, just because of what I've experienced and have as a single parent. And that's really being hyper independent. I feel like this is a trigger term or a term that people are using today. Like you can go on any Instagram reel or TikTok video and people talk about this hyper independence. But when I started considering that and even talking about that with friends, I realized that I do things by myself often, always. I do things on my own and I rarely ask for help. And this is something that I've learned to do. I think honestly, this is something that has moved from well beyond me going into single parenthood. I believe that this is something that is more ingrained as far as, my experience growing up as a child being hyper independent. I think honestly it's probably related to like that middle child syndrome. And even though I'm one of four, me and my older brother, we're like right there in the middle. And I think for the both of us, and he probably could attest, we are ones that will kind of move and go on our own, as much as we try not to be dependent upon our parents, especially when we're younger, because the older one needed, the help. The younger one needed more of the help from the parents or guidance from the parents than I did. And so I felt like in order to kind of keep the peace, I don't know why I felt like I had to own peace. And sometimes I feel like that to this day, that I would just do things on my own. I'm not going to ask my parents to help. And then especially coming into being a single parent, I had to learn to do a lot of things on my own. But I think that when we talk about hyper independence, we can even go back to being a strong Black woman. And I always say that it's a fallacy. Being a strong Black woman is a fallacy. It's a falsehood. We shouldn't have to own a strength in a way to where it's hurting us, debilitating us, to where we're stressed, to where we don't know how to ask for help, to where we're putting it all on our shoulders. We're the superwoman for everybody and pouring out of a cup that has nothing left for us in return, or giving everybody the first of ourselves without giving us the first, making sure that we're first partakers of whatever we need, peace, self-care, whatever that looks like. And I'm trying to get into that place even now of saying no, even now of asking for help. But when I talk about that as well, the hyper independence, the being a strong Black woman, kind of having the shouldering of raising my kids and kind of creating this space in this household and being the head of the household for my children for a long time, there's also been kind of an undercurrent or underlying emotion of not feeling safe. And me not feeling safe, it's not like an over emotion where I have a very big fear, but it's just something that I just wear. Like it's a constant. I've learned how to do things on my own. I've learned how to be in spaces where might be predominantly male spaces, and having to do research and educate myself to make sure that I'm not God or not taken advantage of. One instance is me going, taking my son to get his haircut. And you have to understand, me living in a place where I did not have any family around and was new to the area, and now kind of transitioning into this single motherhood. And I've got this young male that needs to get his hair cut. So let me go and find a place where, he can get his hair cut. And I would go. In one instance, it was just, the barbershop was just full of men. And if y'all have been to the barbershop, barbershop talk can be very particular, eye opening. They talk about stuff without filter. And for me as a female, that makes me feel extremely uncomfortable. But I had, my son needs to get his haircut. So I remember taking him one time and me kind of, I'm 5'4", y'all, but me kind of having this essence of standing tall, like I'm gonna walk in there like a 6 foot tall woman. I'm gonna square my shoulders. I'm gonna talk very succinct, short, brief to the barber, not be overly feminine and ha 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 laughing and rolling my eyes. Like I'm gonna be just very direct. I'm gonna lower my voice, and talk a little deeper. And these are things that I've noticed that I would do in places and in situations where I felt unsafe, but I still had to make sure that things were getting done. Getting the floors done in my house, having me and my kids home, and my dad being there. But, I wanted him to stay because I felt super uncomfortable for me being there with these men that I really don't know. They were referred. And they weren't like, through a professional way, you get brother so and so from down the street to do something. But me feeling unsafe, but still having the feeling of, okay, I'm doing this by myself. I did ask, but this person didn't come through for me. They could not stay. So let me just kind of square my shoulders. Let me, extend my height from 5 foot to 6 feet and talk a little deeper and being very direct with these men so they know that I'm not the one to play with. So I have just kind of ingrained myself in situations as a single mom to kind of take care of things by myself on my own. And it's really a trauma response. And that was one of the things that I, was looking back in and understanding that, the hyper independence, the strong Black woman, which, I ain't trying to be a strong Black woman. Really, I'm not. I'm just trying to be me and be as feminine and as soft as God has created me to be, but as wise and as educated and as capable also, and not feeling as if I have to shoulder the whole world or carry the whole world on my shoulder. But one of the things that I learned about hyper independence, again, it's a trauma response. It's rooted in emotional neglect, abuse, or in environments where safety and trust weren't guaranteed. And so again, you can imagine in my marriage, the entire 8 years of my marriage, kind of being in a space where I did not feel like I was being protected. Heck, I wasn't being protected at all, not financially, not emotionally, and not physically, right? And not to say that he was physically abusive, but if you go back and listen to the episode prior to this one, you'll understand what I mean, where I felt like I wasn't safe in that marriage, where trust wasn't guaranteed. And then also it says that when your nervous system learns that people can be counted on, you become the person you always needed. But the only problem is you don't know how to let anyone in. So I've struggled with that. I've struggled with that as a single parent, asking for help. There's so many stories. So I remember going back to school right after my husband left. I told you the first thing I did is pray to God. And I said, God, I need you to help me with my kids. I don't know how I'm going to do this by myself. And then the second thing I did, once I got up from praying, I called the school that I was interested in, the program I was interested in, and the VA, because the VA was going to help me pay for it because I didn't want to lose those spousal benefits. True story. But I remember going back to school right after, my ex-husband left. And so here I am. I don't know why I do this stuff to myself. New city, hour away from family. Told my husband to leave. He said, yeah, he's going to leave. Raising my two kids on my own in school. And the school program was you having to drive up, to Virginia every once in a while. And then I had to do a practicum where I had to go outside of work hours because I had a full-time job. And I had to actually go in and do my practicum, but I didn't know how in the world was I going to do the practicum and still have somebody watch my kids, right? So I had to ask for help, but I was so afraid to ask for help because anytime I would ask people for help, or even, in my marriage, asking my husband to help and to kind of pitch in this way and that, it was no, or it was they would do it halfway. I really want to say but they would do it halfway, they would just take their time because it wasn't as important to them. And I just had to kind of, brace myself for a no. And thank God I had a couple of people that were willing to watch my kids, where I would work full time. I would go to do my practicum, which was at another, different facility. And then my kids in the between would pick my kids up. I would make sure that my kids went to the person's house that said yes, that they would watch my kids. Thank God for her. And that was really through building community at church. Thank God for that. And then I would go and then I would pick my kids up, and it would be late at night, and then, getting them ready for bed. And by that time that they would have already ate. But I probably, if I wasn't in a place where I felt comfortable with people, I probably would have attempted to try to make that work without asking for help. I have just so many situations where I felt like, people have let me down. And again, it goes back to that trauma response. But the bigger thing is the fact that it's just me feeling like I'm unsafe. I don't know if I fully can trust people. So I'd rather just do it on my own or be on my own. I don't know if you all feel like being in a room of a large group of people, and they could be friends, but you still kind of feel singular. You still kind of feel like you're on your own or by yourself. And I think that was one of the things that came along with this feeling or being hyper independent, the feeling of maybe not feeling fully safe and then not fully trusting people. So really all of this kind of stems from me going back to a situation that happened recently where I was invited family, right? So we was able to go to another city to kind of support a family member, which was an amazing event and truly enjoyed it. But I knew that there was family from the state, South Carolina, that were coming. But I felt like, okay, one, this is like recently happening, this hyper independence situation, not fully asking, okay, well, maybe who all is going, maybe if I can carpool with you all. I just felt like, okay, I can just go in the car, I can drive 3.5 hours. And then in my mind, I was thinking, okay, I can stay in this hotel by myself. I don't know who all is at this hotel, but then understanding I have to drive an additional 15 minutes. So if I'm leaving late at night, I have to kind of plan my way around that. And I had one of my cousins talk to me when I was at the event, and she said, "You came by yourself?" And I said, "Yeah." She's like, "Really? You did?" Because everybody else came with somebody else. Like, it was a family event. So they all came with family, but I was like a part of the family, but still not feeling a part of the family. So I came by myself, and I looked at her when she said that, and she was so surprised. I was like, I do this all the time. Like I am singular all the time. Like I go by myself all the time. Like I put myself in situations where maybe I don't feel fully safe and comfortable, but I want to support or be a part. So I'm going to go. I'm not going to ask for help. I'm not going to ask for, because I don't want to be disappointed. I have this fear of being disappointed. And I did ask actually if anybody was, driving to the location from the mutual place that we were at, if they wanted to carpool. And I didn't get a response. So I said, okay, let me turn from this 5'4" girl to a 6 foot woman, broaden my shoulders, coming back to this hotel late at night. Let me broaden my shoulders and talk with my voice a little bit deeper so I don't bring off the essence, I guess you could say, of being uncomfortable. But I'm always uncomfortable. I'm always feeling like I am not safe. And that was kind of something I was just thinking about. And I felt like maybe I needed to come on here to see if anybody else has experienced that or felt like that, especially as a single mom. I know, when it comes to the feelings of being unsafe, and again, it's not me having like this big fear, but I don't even know how to describe it. Just knowing that I do have a covering with God, but I don't have a covering, and being very aware of the lack of a covering. And I think that's probably the best way I can explain it. And because I have a lack of covering, I don't feel safe, but I have to make sure that I provide a safe environment for my kids. I remember, and I have so many stories I can share. I'm not going to share all of them on this episode today, but I remember when I moved into my house. And this was my very first house that I owned on my own. God did it because, good Lord, with my income and how much I was making, I don't even know how I was able to get into that home. But it was a nice house. I kind of miss it to this day because it had a screened in back porch. It had a weeping willow tree. It had a white picket fence, y'all. So, I got the two kids, the dog, the house with the white picket fence, but I didn't have the husband, right? So I almost had everything. But I remember me and my kids, and they were younger, elementary age, and we were walking in the neighborhood. And we walked past this house with this gentleman, and I think he might have been mentally disabled or whatever. And when we walked past him to go in one direction, he was out there looking or whatever, and he was standing on the edge of his driveway. And then we walked back by. The unfortunate thing was that he had his hands in his pants. And so, of course, you can kind of consider and think what he was doing with his hands in his pants. And so not only was he doing that, he actually followed me and my kids back home. And so there's proof of me kind of the absence of a covering, the underlying feeling of not being safe, but still having to stand 6 foot tall, having to square my shoulders. And now I have this responsibility of making sure my kids, who my son is more sensitive to kind of assessing the environment. So he knows, like he can sense fear in me. So I have to be very careful on how I am emotionally around him. So he was having a moment. And then my daughter, she was young. She really had no clue what was going on. But the feeling of being unsafe in that moment, the feeling of me having to walk back to my house and having to call the police. The gentleman actually stood in front of the house and was waving at my daughter, who is like elementary school, and he's a grown man. And again, he was probably mentally disabled for what I could assess. So I had to call the police for me to, find some way to kind of feel safe. But this was in broad daylight too, right? This was in broad daylight. And so I've had many situations like that where I've had to kind of figure out, okay, well, how can I overcome this? How can I make sure that me and my kids are safe? Because it's just me and my kids. I really don't have anybody around me. So if there's a situation that I come into, you kind of go into that fight or flight. And I'm the kind of person, I'm not going to flight. I'm going to fight. And I've had situations where I've actually kind of blacked out a little bit and kind of gotten into a space where it was truly unsafe, but I was mom bear sent. And when I think back on it, it was like, girl, that situation could have got a lot of worse. Couldn't have got a lot of worse. Could have gone a lot worse. But in that particular situation where the gentleman actually followed us back home, my only thing that I could do going forward was, okay, let me be friends with my neighbors. So my neighbor next to me, I had to make sure that I was friends with him. So I knocked on his door same day after the police. And I was like, do you know the guy? Did you see what happened? And they're like, we didn't know. And so I just introduced myself to him, and he was, married, him and his wife, and they had older kids. But then he said something to me because his deck was like looking back into my backyard into the screen porch. And he made a comment one time where he's like, yeah, I see you out there. I see you out there. So again, finding this situation where I can tell the absence of a covering. I can have this underlying feeling of not being safe, but still having to protect my kids, which kind of leans into more of that hyper independence and not fully trusting people enough to ask for help. Because again, I've asked, in so many different situations for help or assistance or just whatever. And people have disappointed me time and time again. So I got to the place where I'm just not going to ask. I'm just going to figure it out on my own. So in that situation, I figured it out on my own. I've had situations where people have actually broken into my house when I moved to Atlanta. And I think, you're not really an Atlantean unless, you hear gunshots. Y'all are going to hate me if I say this, or if your house gets broken into. And maybe that might have been just the side of town I was living in, but I felt like it was a good neighborhood. But my house got broken into, and the police officers that came there, like, ma'am, you're the calmest person that we've ever experienced with someone whose houses got broken into. Well, for one, my kids weren't home. They were away for the summer. And the only person that I was worried about or animal I was worried about was my dog. And everything else, what they stole, it's whatever. But again, just finding myself in these places where I don't think I can fully trust outside of just me and my kids. Let me kind of be this mama bear. Let me kind of assert myself in a way, even though I don't feel safe, to present myself as if I feel comfortable in environments and situations. And I don't know if anybody else has felt like that. As a single mom, have you felt being unsafe? And you can be around family, you can have support, you can, have all of these things, but still feeling very singular and feeling like the only. Maybe people don't fully understand you. People don't fully understand what you're experiencing or dealing with. And I don't know how to overcome that. I don't know how I could get to a place even to this day to where I can eradicate the feeling of being unsafe, because it's just something that I've just kind of owned for so long and have compensated with having a plan, a way of escape if I was ever in a situation, or just learning how to do things on my own where I don't really have to rely on other people. I don't know. I don't know. So if you guys let me know in the comments, like, have you been in similar situations? Does being hyper independent, does that resonate with you? Is that something that you currently walk through? Does that make you feel empowered? And if I was to ask that question for myself, I would say no. I think at this point in my life, when I need assistance or help, I mean, I've gotten a little bit better and I've asked for help, but then there's some places and times where I'm just like, to do it all on my own, it kind of gets a little tiring. It kind of gets a little exhausting. I really, would rather not have to be, A, B, C, and D, F, G, all the way to Z when you talk about all the roles that I have to operate in as a single parent, as the only earner in the household, as the person that is the caretaker of the house, of the children, a daughter that moved back home. And efforts to get mutual support. I'm going to support my parents because they're a little bit older, and maybe I'll get the support that I need from family as well, to be the emotional shoulder for people to kind of call and express, the things that they're going through, and kind of carrying all of that stuff and all of these roles. And then, working, the role of employee, and the different roles that come with that, and finding myself in a place where I can ask for help, but I'd rather not, because I don't know if people really help in a way that I need. And then finding myself in a place where I can compensate or kind of create the illusion of me being strong in a sense, confident in a sense, where in some situations I have not been. And, the event that I went to, which was amazing and fun, but when I had to depart from family, I was like singular. I was going back to a hotel late at night to where I did not feel safe. But I had to kind of push that out of my mind and just make sure I was aware of my surroundings, aware of where I was driving, aware of who all was around when I'm trying to go to my hotel. But then realizing, and this is me kind of just thinking, like, I've been wearing that and owning that for years. And I don't know how I could not own it. And I don't know if, when people talk about their significant other and how they met a significant other and that person was their safe place, they felt safe with them. I don't know, like, if that's like something that would be considered an answer. I don't know, but it's something that I'm navigating through, understanding, how can I be more open and more trusting of people? How can I kind of overcome some of the things that I've experienced and be in a place where I can rely on others? How can I find a space and a place to where I feel safe, to where I feel like I'm covered, to where I feel like my children are covered? And I'm still working on those things. So I just wanted to kind of come on here and kind of do a mental flossing, not really sharing like what happened next after my husband walked out the door, but just something that kind of popped up recently about how I've been navigating life as a single woman, as a single mother, and talk about maybe some of these areas that maybe people really don't discuss. And I don't know if the feeling of being unsafe is just regulated to being a single parent or a single mom. I would imagine women, probably period, have been in situations where they have not felt safe. Where do you get to that place where you just feel safe though? Like, what do you do? And and again, I keep kind of going back to that because I don't know like what that answer is for me. I think that I will always kind of have that underlying emotion present. I think that I will always be a person who will kind of just do it by myself and be by myself, or even if I'm in a room with groups of people who I adore and love, I'll still kind of do it by myself and be by myself and kind of be that singular individual and try to, if I feel like I'm being attacked, get into that fighting mode. And maybe that's what it is. Maybe I'm kind of stuck in a fight survival mindset that I have to kind of work through, that was probably present when I was younger as a child in my, childhood, but was triggered in my marriage and in this journey of single parenthood. So I don't know. I want to hear your feedback. This is not me offering like great insight, great lessons, but this is like me coming on, being honest about where I've been emotionally, and my thoughts and where I am. I am not perfect by all means. And I think that probably has a lot to do with just the way that I present myself and how I build community and not be more of the introverted type of person or quieter person. Because I think in situations where you're like networking or getting to know people, that was my phone, y'all. Um, I assess the environment, the situation, the people to kind of know whether or not it's worth it for me to engage. And then if it's not worth it for me to engage, I will disengage in a minute and just be gone and come back to maybe a place of comfort, which is currently sitting at home and working from home. But I know that I need to get out of that because I've got children that are almost out of the house and I need to get to a place, of kind of just living life full out. And maybe I can recapture some of those years of kind of emotionally cutting myself off in a way with the hyper independence, with the kind of just creating the boundaries of protection that were more like walls where nobody could really get in. So I recognize that. But again, I feel like I'm rambling this time on this episode. I just want to say, thank you all for listening in to Jeneen kind of assessing herself, talking about this topic. What are your thoughts on hyper independence when it comes to single parenthood, especially for my single moms? And then I also want to hear back from you when it relates to feeling unsafe. Like, do you feel the same way I feel? Is there like this underlying feeling unsafe or always having to maintain a space of safety and planning ahead and going way above and beyond to kind of put yourself in a bubble where you feel safe, but maybe you still don't feel as safe? Do you feel that way? Maybe not, but just wanting to know your thoughts on that. And so again, I recognize that for me, this has been a long journey. For me, this has been a place where I'm still kind of growing in some things. I'm still learning some lessons I'm still learning, but I do want to applaud everyone that is on this journey, whether or not you've been on it as long as I have. And I'm talking about just the single parenthood journey, or if you're newly going on this journey. I want you to know that being strong, holding down your home, taking care of all of the responsibilities, being that nurturing mother that you're supposed to be naturally, and still kind of bringing in that father figure energy as well. It's something that we don't naturally do, but I just want to commend you on being able to do it. I want you to understand that you are seen, even though you have to put on maybe a persona of being strong, a fierce persona of being that strong Black woman. That I think is a fallacy, but understanding that, we can still do it, but it should not be a weight. So hoping that we all within this community can find a way to where we are still being strong for ourselves, serving ourselves, right? And still being able to be present for our kids and for others, but not having the extra weight that's added to us. that kind of bogs us down. So continue to kind of forge forward. Let's continue to build this community of single parents, whether you're a single mom, a single dad, where we can fully support each other. I think we know what we go through. We can relate. I see you. You see me. We can relate to each other. So don't be a stranger. Whatever you want to say in the comments, Instagram me. You can say in the comments on YouTube, because again, I'm on YouTube, y'all, and TikTok. I just want to know what your thoughts are. And if anybody's out there that has a need, a prayer request, or anything, please share it. But again, thank you for your time tonight. And until the next time, be well and God bless.